Hello and welcome to today's devotional. My name is Jack Heineke. Today we're in the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 1, verse 18. For the message of the cross is foolishness, absurd, and illogical to those who are perishing and spiritually dead, because they reject it. But to us who are being saved by God's grace, it is the manifestation of the power of God. Why would a grown man weep at the sight of a lit cross on the back of a flatbed during, of all things, a Halloween parade? It would be for several reasons. The man was prodigal at the time. He had stopped church attendance due to being hurt twice by two different church leaders at two different churches. He was once a church leader himself and had gained much from those leadership roles. And the members of those churches had become family to him. But when he was shown the door by the leaders, he had lost those family members. And that had wounded his soul, and like many, he carried with him many more wounds on his soul from his life. Having had experienced sexual abuse as a young child was one of his earliest and most deepest wounds. Being raised by loving yet conflicted alcoholic, gambling, food-addicted parents inflicted more early wounds on him. These wounds caused him to withdraw and to distrust pretty much everyone. Because if you really can't trust the people who are supposed to look out for you and protect you, well, who can you trust? He developed food addiction early in life. Food was comforting in more ways than one. But this just ended up adding to his insecurities. He had overheard a cousin at a family gathering at an aunt and uncle's house remark on how could someone love him when he was so disgustingly fat. Now the man doesn't remember exactly what was said, but that's pretty much what he heard. The cousin has no idea what he had just heard. This just confirmed what he was suspicious of all along. How could anyone love him? Another deep wound to his soul. He had found the temporary comfort of drugs and alcohol at about age 11. He had finally found peace with the use of these substances. Temporary, but still peace. They became his friend. He also learned to play guitar and sing because he desperately wanted approval and attention for something in the world. And this gave him that attention and acceptance from lots of people. It also gave him a comforting private world to go to when he played. He had many friends, but none of them were allowed to know about the wounds he carried because he never talked about them or showed them to anyone for fear of further rejection. He didn't want to look at them himself, let alone let someone else look at it. But he was afraid that they would see the truth of the disgusting person that he thought he was deep down inside, and he knew that he wouldn't be able to handle that rejection, so he kept it all to himself. The use of drugs and the hiding of what he thought was true about himself, well, that also formed wounds on his soul. He had also sold drugs, he acted out, and had unintentionally hurt other people. This hurting of others also wounded their souls and his. His drug use had worried his parents and other friends. Wounds to him and wounds to them. He met a girl and fell in love until she left him for someone else. He had imagined his life always being with her because he loved and trusted her until she too hurt him. But she knew he wasn't as stable as he pretended to be and was not husband material. So she moved on, and his drug use just escalated. He pretended that he was a free, happy man, but he withdrew even further and deeper within this deep pain and found comfort and peace with more dangerous drugs and more dangerous methods of administration of those drugs. If you can't trust those that tell you that they love you, more wounds. Self-inflicted wounds also. Now, he still played music, for this too gave him peace, but after a few failed bands that had skirted with success, he became disillusioned with that soul-sucking business. He became extremely promiscuous. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll essentially was his religion. It was what was going to save him, but as the list of women grew, he became emptier and emptier inside. so more wounds on his soul and wounds on their souls as well. So in 1990, he hit what many call a bottom. In his living room, for the first time in his life, he screamed from the pit of his soul for God to help him. The wounds themselves were all just right at the very surface, because the drugs stopped taking him to a place of peace and instead took him straight to the pain. So much unrelenting pain that suicide was sounding like a viable option to his troubled soul. But he didn't want to die, but yet he couldn't go on like this. So in complete desperation, he screamed at God, who he didn't believe in at the time, to help him. He knew that death was right around the corner unless something changed. Something did change. God heard this prayer and answered it. Next thing he knew, he was attending a 12-step fellowship and he got clean. Life had changed dramatically as he developed incredibly loving friendships with hundreds of other recovering addicts, people just like him, who taught him how to stay clean, how to work, how to live the steps. And at almost the 3-year mark, he began to reluctantly believe in Jesus Christ. He studied the Bible. He had thought it was nonsense and foolishness until he opened it, and upon God's instructions to him to read it as if it were the truth, the God he had screamed at for help was really beginning to heal those wounds, because the truth became manifest in his life. He began to play guitar and sing worship to this God at church. Now he knew why he had learned to play and sing. His life went from being in chaos and desperation and almost death to purpose, fulfillment, and life. He had learned of the wisdom of God, which changed him in ways nothing else could. He had even taught others about this wisdom he found in the Bible, that he found only in the Bible. He was being transformed by the renewing of his mind. He had actually literally found the answer in Jesus Christ himself to the problem of the wounds that he carried around throughout his life. What was once a hostile place became an oasis of peace, because that was his mind and that's where he dwelled always. But life went on, and as life does, it wounded him further, for both of his parents died. Dear close friends died. More wounds. He fell in love again. He married this love. But their marriage, as loving as it was, became defined by chaos and disorder. They tried desperately to attend church and hang on to God, but as noted earlier, they were both shown the door. They unfortunately began to blame one another and God, which caused his and her wounds to deepen and grow, which caused him to withdraw from her. Self-preservation took over for him, which means you don't tell anyone what's really going on. More deep wounds for both. They began to question their faith in God. He reverted back to withdrawing within, and he eventually relapsed. He had become a liar, hiding the truth from everyone, including his wife, trying to find peace and comfort through the use of a substance. More wounds. But at a Halloween parade, he saw this lit-up cross coming down the road on the back of a flatbed truck, and the tears just flowed. This surprised him, as he didn't expect to see the cross, let alone lose it at the sight of the cross. But lose it he did, for he knew what this cross represented to him. He knew that this cross, this method of execution, was his only answer, and he knew that this cross was life. And it took a long time, much like this very long devotional today, for me to get clean again and to get right with God. If you've read up until now, I thank you. But I got clean again and got right with God, and many of you are shocked at the news of my relapse, and for that I am truly sorry. I never meant to hurt any of you, not my wife, not my kids, my family, or my friends by lying to them. But liars, just like myself, inflict a tremendous amount of pain on others. I have to live with that, and it is a tremendous regret that I have. I have to admit the truth, for that is the only way to get better and to receive healing. I needed to get honest and just tell my story. I needed to confess to you and to God, because that's what happens at this cross. I cannot encounter God and lie to Him. It's impossible. And as I fell down at that cross and confessed my sin, He didn't beat me up. Instead, He began again to heal these self and life-inflicted wounds. This cross is all about redemption, forgiveness, and salvation. Not just for the promise of eternal life, which is pretty important, but for healing in the here and now. He removes the guilt of the wounds so that I'm now free to walk with Him and you. This cross and those who believe in it might be foolish and illogical to the rest of the world, but to a sinner like me, it is the grace and the power of God, and it's the grace of God that I have faith in, and it is the manifestation of the power of God. To me, the cross is not at all foolish or illogical. In fact, it is the most logical, loving, healing, life-giving thing that I've ever encountered. The cross really is life. It's really my life. So I hope and I pray that you have an awesomely blessed day today.